But I kind of want to go before that. How did mindfulness enter your life before that? Like what kind of drove those conversations or those thoughts? And the reason I asked that is because I know toxic masculinity was kind of like a big thing a couple of years ago, but I love that the world's becoming more accepting of men sharing their ideas and emotions. But yeah, how did it enter your life?
Well, I'll get to the mindfulness piece here in a second. I love that you mentioned the toxic masculinity because that's something that Will and I talk about often.
Yep.
And that term gets misused a lot, and a lot of men take offense to that term. The term toxic masculinity does not mean masculinity is toxic. The term toxic masculinity means that if you are forcing masculinity on other people, then that's toxic. If you're forcing the preconceived notions, the society accepted notions of what masculinity is on other people, then that's being toxic. If you force anything on other people, that's toxic. Yeah. But like if you force the perception that men shouldn't cry or that boys shouldn't cry, that's being toxic. If you are forcing the fact that men should drive big trucks and shoot guns, I love shooting guns. I used to drive a big truck. That's all well and good. Hey, good for you. More power to you. But that doesn't mean you need to force that on somebody else.
Yeah.
And if they are not driving a big truck and they're not shooting guns or doing whatever, that doesn't make them not masculine, and it doesn't make them lesser beings. So I just want to make sure I throw that out there.
Yeah.
As far as the mindfulness aspect, how I personally got into it is kind of a long story, but I'll give you, as we were discussing before, we're both avid readers. And I like to start by getting kind of the Reader's Digest version of a book and then realizing whether or not I like it and then going after and reading the full book later. So I'll give the Reader's Digest version of how I got to mindfulness. The long story short is in the SEAL teams battled with stress, anxiety, survivor's guilt, moral injury from what I saw, what I did on the battlefield, and the losses that I experienced along the way. And that survivor's guilt, depression, stress, anxiety, moral injury, all that manifested itself as anger. It manifested itself as sadness. It manifested itself as confusion. It manifested itself as guilt. And that caused me to have some very dark thoughts about whether or not I deserve to be here still, whether or not I should go on in life. And I went and sought counseling, and I was actually on medication for all that now at this point. And the medication had numbed things to a point, but it had numbed some of the enjoyment as well. So I went and saw a counselor who recommended meditation. And the fact that he recommended it to me was a godsend, but I didn't realize it at the time. I laughed at him. I was like, meditation? What?
Yeah.
So like in my mind.
And you're in the SEALs at this point, right? Like this is when, yeah. And like how long, how deep into the SEALs, like how many years in had you been?
So at this time, I was in the SEALs about 15 years.
Oh, so I mean, so you're definitely like a seasoned salty, right? Or maybe not salty, but like a seasoned veteran of the SEALs, right?
Right.
So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I've been in for a while. Yeah. It was definitely dealing with the stuff from decades or maybe a decade and a half ago.
Yeah.
And unpacking it. So anyway, this guy recommends it to me. I laugh at him. I'm thinking, hey, look, I'm in this big, bad, hairy, scary frog man. Don't tell me about meditation, dude. And he's like, well, okay, if I had something that would improve your performance physically and mentally, if I had something that would improve your life personally and professionally, if I could give that to you in a pill, would you take it? And as a type A personality, special operator, you're always looking for an edge over the enemy on the battlefield, or you're looking for an edge over your buddy right next to you. And I was like, yeah, whatever that is, I would take that pill. And he's like, well, that same pill, quote unquote, is meditation. It will improve your life. It will improve your performance professionally and personally. It will improve your performance mentally and physically. And so I went back and I started meditating with one of the apps that he had recommended. I downloaded a simple app called Insight Timer at the time. And a type A personality, I jumped right into an hour-long meditation and failed about 30 seconds into it. Or at least I thought that I had failed. You can't fail at meditation. It's just what you perceive. And so I perceived that I was a failure, and I went back and I was like, man, Doc, I'm failing at this meditation stuff. It's not for me. And he's like, well, that's like lining up at the starting line of a marathon without ever having run a step before. You've got to work your way up to a longer meditation. Start small, start simple. So I went back, started small, started simple, worked my way up to 3, 5, 10-minute meditations, simple breath work, nothing super in depth, nothing super emotional, just some simple breath work, much like I led you guys through when we all met a couple of weeks back. And that started to have immediate effects. I started to feel the relaxation. I started to feel de-stressed, not distressed. All right. So I just want to make sure I emphasize that. So it helped, but then those effects would wear off. I would get in traffic, get cut off by some jerk, and then I would be back into the red. So this guy was like, look, the lasting effects come about 2 months in. Just like the gym, using another gym analogy, if you work out for 2 months, that's when you start to see the effects with your body. That's when you start to really feel the long-lasting effects. And so I did that. I meditated for another 2 months or so, and that's when I started to have those long-lasting effects. And right around the same time, I was starting to think about what I wanted to do when I left the military. And I had buddies coming up to me asking me what I was doing differently, because they saw the positive sides in me and what I was doing. And I was starting to teach them about meditation. And then the light bulb kind of went off. I was like, I can do this for a living and help people attain kind of the sense of fulfillment and then sense of peace that I have. And I mean, I'm certainly not always fulfilled. I'm certainly not always at a sense of peace. But when I do meditate and when I live mindfully, it allows me to bring everything down and settle down and be in that sense of peace and be in that sense of fulfillment in the here and now. And that's what I want for others. So that's how I got to it.